Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Darsh Shah.
And I'm Dr. Altamash Raja.
And welcome to Medicine Redefined,
a podcast where we will explore the often overlooked but necessary components of health, what we consider to be the fundamentals.
We will investigate topics and practices that can give you and your patients the best chance to optimize a healthy lifestyle. It's time to move the needle forward and put the health back in healthcare. All right, what's up, everyone? We are back with another Lessons Learned, 2 guests, 3 episodes. It's kind of been a trend of ours lately. We've always been having some guests coming in with a lot of in-depth information. This time it was Mario Novo, physical therapist, talking about blood flow restriction. So in-depth, very in-depth episodes, but nonetheless awesome because we beat Peter Attia to it. So that's our takeaway right there. We're on the forefront of medicine.
Yeah, I don't really think he gives a shit. It was fun, man. You know, I came into it, I think, having a good understanding of BFR and also have applied it to my own practice and also personally to my own training, as you know. But information packed, right? Extremely dense. So I do apologize for those of you who listened and maybe didn't have a great understanding of it. I certainly think if there is 1 or 2 episodes that we've had that is worth maybe listening to it another time, or maybe even more than 2 times. It's this, Mario kind of just the exemplary professor. It was really awesome. And I even went back, I had to listen to it kind of to understand some of the biochemistry and kind of going back to undergrad, dropping the Krebs cycle, something that you want to put so far back in your brain that we don't use on a day-to-day basis. But I think it's super understand. I mean, you and I both know that understand the mechanisms of action is the first step when it comes to therapeutic application. But, because there's still people, I think actually earlier today, I was having a discussion with some of the team strength and conditioning professionals, and they were talking about how there's maybe a new study. I didn't get to ask which study they're referencing to that maybe shows that BFR isn't great for preventing atrophy. I haven't been able to find that on PubMed, but I think it's really important to kind of understand the mechanisms behind why things are happening, and then you can start applying it to more robust data, more clinical data. And lucky for us, we've got tremendous amount of level 1 data for the systematic reviews, meta-analyses, randomized controlled trials, you name it.
Absolutely, yeah. And and the reason I bring up Peter Attia too is because for the folks out there who listen to him, if he's talking about something, it's got to be on the forefront, right? Like this is something that we know, just talking to Mario, who says in Japan and in East Asia, this is something, blood flow restriction, that they're applying to in their regular gyms. And now bring it over here. Go ahead.
No, you know what's no. Go finish your thought. I'll say it after that.
Okay, all right. But bring it here to the States at least. And making an ICD-10 code and really using it for rehab, whether it's for injuries or just also kind of just the science behind it. And I agree with you in the sense that I think our listeners, if they listen to this, maybe get lost in the weeds, it might be a good opportunity to look at Mario Novo, kind of see his talks, go on YouTube, understand blood flow restriction, maybe in a general sense, and then kind of come back to these episodes because, there's a lot of biochemistry. And, from my functional medicine mentor, he's the one who always tells me that, it's all about the biochemistry, right? Before you apply anything and understanding lifestyle medicine, especially. So for those of you nerds out there, I mean, this was an awesome episode, kind of just going into the biochem, endocrine, muscle physiology, vascular physiology, you name it.
Yeah, no, I love that. What I was going to say is I don't even know if it's at the forefront kind of thing. This isn't as cutting edge. Like as we talked about,
right.
He talked about Sato's applied it from like the 1960s. And, Mario did a phenomenal job in episode 1 talking, kind of going through the history of how it kind of originated, of course, in Japan. But then you had the separate Marvel timeline he referenced, which anytime you can refer Marvel in an episode, for me, it's automatically win. I know you're a DC guy,
yeah.
but he had talked about how it was also happening. I think it was SAMC that he was talking about, right? In some of the limb salvage programs that they were using it. And so I think in the exercise science literature, it's been talked about quite a bit. Of course, he said, again, for lack of a better word, quote unquote, the bodybuilding world had perverted it, right? I mean, people have been using tourniquet type therapy for a long time, particularly for musculoskeletal medicine, augmenting the muscle physiology, that kind of stuff. I think that the more scientific approach to it is kind of what we're talking about. So
application. and such.
Yeah, exactly. And
Right.
particularly with the newer electronic devices that are,
Mhm.
whether it's a sphygmometer in it that's automatically built in, or if you're using a Doppler to kind of make sure that you're using the right percentage of your limb occlusion pressure or arterial occlusion pressure. I think that's somewhat novel. At this point, having looked at it for quite a while now, just because you know me, I mean, I research the
Mhm.
hell out of everything before I start using it,
Right.
even if I'm going to invest in something.
Yeah.
And then after I invested in it, not only tinkering it with my own training, and of course, my coach helps with that, but also thinking about how are we using it in our patients. I would say read quite a bit about it, and I would say it's really about now fine tuning the protocols. Like, what is the best thing that's going to work, and how can we continue augmenting about it? And for those of you who don't know, we'll link the Peter T episode. I think that
Mhm.
forget who the guy was, Jeremy something that came on.
Jeremy L.
Yeah,
L. Locklear or something. Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
from Oklahoma or Mississippi. Ole Miss,
Jeremy Lonicky,
right?
Ole Miss. Yeah.
Ole Miss, yeah. And he's talking about a lot of his work in his lab. They're actually looking at stuff that's beyond the basics of, hey, you apply it on the proximal part of the limb, like upper arm. You know that distally in the biceps, triceps, forearm muscles, hand intrinsics, you're getting benefits there. But what about the proximal to that, right? And so
Yeah.
that's, I think, still stuff we're figuring out.
What has been your experience with it? Because I mean, I haven't tried this, but is it like that excruciating pain? Like, what kind of protocol have you been doing with it?
So yeah, in terms of application, so I have I don't use I use a device that has this sphygmometer built in, and so it's kind of set in a it. I'm not really exactly sure the science behind of how it detects which arterial occlusion pressure is, which is kind of from what Maria talked about. It didn't really make sense to me. So I have to kind of talk to the folks who made it again to exactly figure out what that system worked like. But basically, setting it a percentage, so whether it says 30%, 40%, 50% for the arms, that's kind of what the literature supports for upper extremities, and for lower extremities, anywhere from 40 to 80%. With respect to the question about pain, yeah, I think for the upper extremity, getting at 50% is something that I can tolerate just fine. That's actually where I do most of my training. For the lower extremity, when I first tried to do it, 80%, that was it's out of this world type of pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming back to Jeremy L's discussion that they talked about, what I learned from that was interesting, is at least according to what he suggested, that the literature doesn't support that higher pressures are necessarily better. If you're in that 30, for 40 to 60, 40 to 80 range, you might get the same benefits if you're looking to enhance, muscle size, if hypertrophy is your
Gotcha.
goal, maybe even
Right.
strength. He did mention that if vascularity is something that you're looking for, and for different reasons, people might be interested in that, then you need to be on that upwards of 80%. But yeah, I mean, the higher the pressure, the more discomfort you're going to experience. And I think I'm also an individual who has some, I got some bigger legs, some thick full back legs.
Thick with two
And
C's.
so my pressures for the lower extremity are a little bit higher too.
Okay. Solid. And then you guys are using this at Geisinger? I know Penn State
We do.
Sports Med here has been using it as well. I haven't gotten a chance to kind of, talk to them, explore it, or kind of shadow, but
Yeah, we do. We use the Delphi system, which is kind of the
okay.
gold standard right now. Again, and what I loved about Mary talking about it, he emphasized safety first, like
Mm-hmm.
not once, not twice, not thrice, like over and over again, and in all the different ways, which is important, right? Anytime we're applying a new application, new therapeutic, you need to consider the contraindications and the safety and what can go wrong, particularly when it's thing like this that I can't believe he mentioned that people are putting that around their neck and head. I mean, it's amazing. But yeah, we were using the Delphi system. I actually looked into that. Obviously, putting cost aside, I don't like the idea of a tethered system, right? Like you're walking around with something and you basically, it's an IV pole. You put the thing on an IV pole and you're walking around
Oh, I
your
didn't
house.
realize that. Okay, it's not like a.
Yeah, because it's like you're attached to the cuff, and it's
I
basically
see.
like, and so it could interfere with the type of exercise you're doing. But Johnny Owens, the guy who I guess he's the founder and the creator of it, he's big on research, and that's what's cool about it. And so they partner up with a lot of different professional teams and also medical systems to kind of use that.
Gotcha. Now, is there anything in the science that kind of wowed you? I think for me, it was the fact that, when you do regular weightlifting or bodybuilding, you kind of see that strength gain first, right? And then you get the hypertrophy after, as he mentions. But in blood flow restriction, you kind of get the opposite, where this might be
Exactly.
something great for bodybuilders where you get that hypertrophy right away, right? And as he kept calling it, it's that cell swelling or the pump. Except he had a cool Arnold accent that I don't have. And then you start to see the strength afterwards. And
Right.
that's something you've gone through, right? You're like a large polo now, went from a small to a large.
That's right. That's right. I can't really remember that. Yeah, I actually have. And you know what's interesting? I have. I've seen my the strength curve coming later. And now, what's interesting about that, though, as we'll talk about the second half of this episode here, stress has a lot to do with how you feel in terms of strength, and your muscles feel it too. So I think that I've had a different type of stress as well. So I was actually wondering if some of the PRs that I'm hitting in terms of on my squats and deadlifts, not PRs for all-time lifetime PRs, but I would say in the last 5 to 6 years, if that has something to do with that, or is it the BFR? Hard to say. Yeah, it's really hard to say. But yeah, size is something that I did notice pretty quickly. And I think he had mentioned typically what's the conventional model of thinking when it comes to the strength curve. Initially, the initial gain that you're going to have is going to be in the first 4 to 6 weeks is going to be the neurological adaptations for strength training, which is why people talk about, hey, muscle memory. Ooh, muscle memory comes back. And one can argue muscles, like, what does that even mean? But
right.
But again, we keep referencing the PRT episode, so we got to link it in the show notes. That guy Jeremy, he actually they actually discussed about how that dogma might not be correct. He's someone who challenges that maybe the neurological adaptations don't come first. Maybe it's size that comes first. But I do think, in my personal experience and N of one, I would certainly say that the muscle size, I may definitely experience the hypertrophy first, and now I'm getting stronger. But it's hard to say. I don't know if the strength is because of the BFR, like I said.
Yeah. I got to finish that episode. I haven't gone fully through it, but it's definitely something that's cool to learn from. Absolutely, at least from a different perspective, kind of Mario, in the sense that they're doing different research. Cool, man. This is a kind of a tough episode to break down, just because there's so much, and I would hate to bore our listeners too in terms of going into the science, because they can better hear from Mario from a lot better scientific perspective. Is there anything else that you kind of want to touch on, or?
No, I think he articulated really well. The one thing I'll say is, I think we spend a lot of time looking at its applications in rehab. Of course, going from the most debilitated individuals when we talked about limb salvage programs, amputees, and that he talked about the genesis in that region. And then, of course, going to the orthopedic literature, we didn't spend a lot of time looking at it from the performance benefit. Well, but I do want to emphasize that we also have good evidence to kind of support that. We've had previous guests come on here and talk about that, hey, for ACL rehab, it works really well. And for just rehab in general, works really well. In the geriatric population, because you can't load their bones and joints in as much as that, but you still want to, again, sarcopenia is something that everybody experiences after the age of 40, unless you were detrained earlier in your life. So you want to fight that as much as possible. So that's where we're seeing a lot of evidence going to. You're not seeing a lot of people in the exercise science, exercise phys lab put this on. However, just in June of this year, in the American Journal of Sports Medicine, which is like the parent journal for sports medicine, there was an article that was published. It was a systematic review looking at the benefits of BFR in athletes. And essentially, basically what they did was they filtered through about 200 papers, or maybe 230 something papers. We'll link it. And they kind of narrowed it down to about 10 different papers. And they found that 7 of the 9 studies found a significant increase in strength associated with the use of BFR training as compared with controls. 50%, or 4 of the 8, noted significant increases in muscle size, which again, we've talked about over and over again, associated with BFR training. And 3 out of the 4 reported significant improvements in sport-specific measurements in the groups that use BFR training. One thing to note, though, is that there was significant variability in occlusive cuff pressures across studies. And I think a lot of that has to do with the various systems that you use. I think towards the end of episode 2, when Mary was talking about the various apparatuses that are out in the market. I don't know. Is that the right term?
I don't know what the plural is. Apparatuses. Yeah.
But they're different systems, right? You've got the single chamber, you've got double chamber. So I wonder, because I know at least for the system that he recommended, the H Plus, or the Smart Tool system, they like 150 millimeters of mercury pressure with them corresponds to like 350 for the BFR thing, right? Just because the system is a little bit different. So I think that can probably make it a little bit more challenging too. But yeah, it's just something to note. But as always, like if you're working with a qualified professional who understands this, there's nothing like experimenting with yourself and figuring out if it is right for you.
Yeah, I think that's key, right? I think the beauty of all this research and these, the podcasts and things that are coming out about blood flow restriction is that the nuance will start to, focus in a little bit more on different groups and populations. So that's going to be awesome. And I just love the plural apparatuses. So for you listeners out there, preparing for your spelling bee. Right there, yeah. Awesome. All right. Shall we move on to the next episode?
Let's do it, man.
All right. Here's a quick message from our sponsor, Comp Health. There are a lot of podcasts out there, murder mysteries, breaking news. There's even a podcast about garden gnomes. But instead, you're here, learning how to be the best version of yourself. Smart move. Do you know what else is a smart move? Working a locum tenens assignment with Comp Health. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you are a physician, you already have a job. But that's the best part. You can work flexible locum assignments on the side for extra income, or you can work locums full-time too. And to top it all off, locums almost always pays more on average. Just head to financialresidency.com/comp health and see what locums can do for you financially. And now back to the show. Okay, so this one was with Dr. Amy Shah, no relation. Awesome episode. Like I said in the beginning of it, I mean, she's grown so much on Instagram just by providing so much education as a lifestyle medicine doctor. What'd you kind of take away from that one?
Inspiration, honestly, in a word. She's really cool. She's got an awesome journey. And I think that one that a lot of people can relate to, right? That the story that I'm not sure if we got the full version of it when she kind of talks about just that realization that she had when she was running around and she had become partner in practice and she didn't want to miss a meeting, but she didn't want to be a bad parent and she was running and she got that car accident. What's funny about that is there's always that one big moment, the near death experience, right? That kind of makes you, I don't know how bad her car accident was, but something like, what the hell am I doing?
Right.
You hear that from a lot of people. You never want to be on the side of it. Sometimes you just need a wake up call. And she just maximized that opportunity, which was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, all of us can relate in that sense that I think most of us in this culture are just trying to make it, right? Like we're trying to be successful in more than one thing. We're trying to prove it to other people, whether it's our kids or spouses or family or parents, our friends. And sometimes we get lost in that and not realize that, hey, we're actually in it for us, right? And we need to really individualize what that means for each individual, right? And not trying to people please, which we kind of talk about in that episode, especially coming from South Asian community, right? I mean, that is what we're almost taught to do at a young age is respect your elders and people please. So we definitely kind of go into that a little bit in her journey. But I love how she took that and then started. So she has a nutrition background from Cornell. And one of the most important things that I've learned was that she grew up in India, I think, for like her first 5 years of life. So she was always around Ayurveda and kind of this traditional Indian medicine. And then when she went to Cornell, graduated, she kind of threw away that Ayurvedic Eastern thinking. But then she started to realize as she went down this wellness lifestyle medicine that a lot of those things held true. A lot of things that her parents or grandparents were saying kind of held true. And she found a way to incorporate wellness back into conventional medicine, right? And really form that blend, really take the science of what we know now, right? She talks about dysregulation of the endocrine system, quote unquote adrenal fatigue, the HPA axis, and then we get into circadian fasting.
Yeah. No, on that note of the adrenal fatigue thing, I think this is an important topic, right? I mean, because again, maybe, I don't know, maybe 7 to 10, 15, or maybe forever, honestly. It's just kind of a roller coaster. Things come in, things get hot, things go away, things come in, things get hot, or pendulum, whichever one you want to talk about. Adrenal fatigue is kind of back now, particularly when high stress, everybody's on high alert, right? We talked with Jay recently about this. I think when I asked her and she kind of clarified, which I'm glad she did, that this isn't really an accepted medical diagnosis, right? And it's not something that can be quantified objectively, as opposed to adrenal insufficiency, which is something that we can, right? We actually have data. We can look at that. You have objective findings on a physical exam. You can document that. Yeah. Most of the time when people are talking about adrenal fatigue or the proponents of it, what they'll say is, they'll claim like it's a mild form of adrenal insufficiency, right, caused by chronic stress. And the theory behind it is that your adrenal glands, they're unable to keep up with the pace and the demands of the perpetual fight or flight, go 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 go, kind of what you just talked about. And that our current blood tests, according to this theory, they aren't sensitive enough to detect the small decline in adrenal function, but your body is, and you are. And maybe there's some truth to that. I think Dr. Shah did touch on that sometimes our testing isn't advanced enough to figure that out, and that's, science is just getting better and it's evolving. But at the same time, I do think that we have to be careful. She didn't mention it on our show, but she did mention it elsewhere. Sometimes, when people will say this, they will prey on individuals who are stressed out. Because the fact of the matter is everybody is, but now, so maybe over the last 18, 24 months, people are even more so, and they don't feel right.
Right.
So if you go to a qualified health professional and you tell them you don't feel right, and for the first time somebody actually listens to you and says, hey, listen, I know your lab findings are all okay, but I know why you're not right, because you have adrenal fatigue. I mean, I do feel bad about that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because it's not necessarily your physiology all the time that's giving up on you, right? It's like there's also a mental and emotional component that we got to realize, right?
Exactly.
Sure, if you exhaust all the options and you actually work. See, this is why it makes me so angry that like functional medicine is not board certified, right? It's not 100% backed. Like there's so many people out there doing it right, but there's so many out there doing it wrong. And that's why it gets such a bad rep. It just pisses me off so much. And that's a perfect example is that people prey on you. And because they don't take insurance, there's no ICD-10 code for adrenal fatigue. So I can charge you whatever I want and tell you whatever I want, So that's a big point you made. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And, I think that another thing it's important to understand, actually, we just read a piece from Precision Nutrition about this. They talked about, there was I think I might've seen on Instagram first, they were talking about, do you have stress bod? Right. And basically it's an awesome infographic. I'll find it and we'll link it in the notes here. Basically it's actually a quiz. I think it's a stress perceived quiz. You take the quiz and then gives you information. First, it defines what stress bod is, right? Basically, if everything is hurting, right, you have more GI issues, common GI issues that we talk about often. Your brain fog, you keep getting sick. We talked about this yesterday with one of our other guests. You're struggling with your weight. Maybe you're not in the mood for intimacy. And, your workouts feel impossible because you're fatigued like that. These are signs, and these might not be these might be hard to figure out, right? You have to kind of really step back and look at the big picture. This infographic was cool by PN because it talks about the certain factors that increase your risk of quote unquote stress bod, and then also gives you actionable tips that you can do, right? Of course, you eliminate some strategies, how you can eliminate it. You got to keep a journal so you can continue tracking it, and you can add new stress relieving activities. Things that we've talked about over and over, but this is really, really cool. And again, there isn't one test, as you guys will see in this awesome infographic. I'm actually looking at it right now, but it's a big picture thing, like everything else in this show is that we always talk about.
Right. I got to take a look at that. I follow PN. I don't think I came across that, so we'll definitely link it.
Yeah.
I got to take a look at that too. Go for it.
No, I was going to say what's cool about it is you kind of, it's just like a quick quiz that you take, and it kind of gives you your stress score, where you might be and how you're tolerating stress, or how you're responding to stress, I should say. Tolerating
stress resiliency. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
So
that's cool. Yeah.
So let's move on to kind of circadian biology, circadian fasting, intermittent fasting, something that I still need to read. Sacha Panda's book, man. It's on the list. Like, I swear, I was like, I need to get more into scientific reading, and it's on the list. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it hopefully by the end of the year.
What's funny about it is I have been listening to Dr. Andrew Huberman a lot. I told you lately, and he does refer to him over and over again because Dr. Huberman talks about this a lot, actually. He gives a lot of the strategies Dr. Shah had talked about. She primarily uses, circadian fasting is her thing. I think that's kind of where she's mentioned that when she first was talking about a lot of other things like sleep and exercise, and everybody's like, yeah, we all know that. But what about this fasting? Talk about this fasting.
Right.
But interestingly, she spent a lot of time on our show talking about light, right? Talking about daily practices and whatnot. Thing. We didn't spend a great deal of time talking about fasting, which is fine, because fasting isn't the greatest thing in the world. Like I know I told you this offline, and it's a tool. It's a tool like anything else. It can be a powerful tool if used in the right person at the right time, in the right context. Or it can be detrimental. And so I think that's really, really important for people to understand. But just taking a back step to just for those people who don't really know what circadian biology is, it's just kind of essentially talking about circadian rhythms, right? Which are your natural internal process that's regulating your sleep and wake cycle. And for most people, it's on a 24-hour sleep and wake cycle. Dr. Matthew Walker will say that some people are beyond that, even a little bit more. And this it can be very responsive, right? It can be any process within an organism. And according to Dr. Sachin Panda's work, every single cell in your body has its own.
Yeah.
And it responds to the environment, the external environment, which is something that we talked about, and we'll mention in a second. And that's what it kind of is, basically.
Yeah, I found it super cool. Her talking about light, kind of brought flashbacks to Rudy Nassif's episode, right, where we talked about light and depth. Kind of give us future glimpse into also like hydration, right? Like you guys will hear this soon in a couple of weeks with Tracy Dews, but talking about how water, right, is in every single cell and how the mechanisms affect. So just talking about Sachin Panda's work, like we literally, what we call it the ultradian rhythm, right, at that point where it's like so nuanced. But yeah, I mean, you're so right about how intermittent fasting is literally just a tool, right? And I think some people take it to say, oh, intermittent fasting works, right? They've seen in general population, the research, the data, it works. Therefore, I have to do it no matter what, regardless of how stressed I am. And that's what it is, right? It's a stress. It's another stressor added to your body. So I know people who wake up at 4 a.m., go for a workout, try to do intermittent fasting on top of it. And my question is why, right? Like you're already waking up so early. We already know our cortisol, kind of peaks. You're also waking up earlier than sunrise, right? And for those of you guys that want to understand the hormone balance and cortisol and all that, we kind of talked about in the episode. But it's just so important to get in tune with your body and not necessarily be so complex with it, right? But even just understanding that, hey, at night, I need to kind of dim the lights down, right? I should try to support my body in terms of getting great deep sleep. And in the morning, I should kind of do the same thing in terms of getting bright light into me, getting some sort of movement, waking up my body, supporting that. And then when you can get that night and day wake sleep cycle together, wow, it does wonders for the rest of your day and weeks to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of just furthering that point a little bit, it's funny because Peter Thiel really said, and Dr. Andrew Huberman last week also released his massive episode about intermittent fasting and the effects of it and how to incorporate that into your practice, if that's something that's right for you. And, what he kind of ultimately settled on, time restricted eating is a better term for it, right? Is kind of eating between the hours of 10 a.m. to maybe 6 p.m. Because again, and I asked Dr. Shah this, it is really difficult. Like, again, back in the day, people were like, okay, just anchor it to your sleep cycle. And so skip breakfast, eat at noon, right? Okay, that's fine. But now we're learning we want to eat in the light hours, right? We're learning more and our thought process is evolving. So now we're like, okay, eat an early dinner, which is, I think, kind of what Dr. Arndt had said too.
Yeah.
But then it's like, according to the way that most people work and just the regular social dynamics of it, like most people like to sit home and enjoy dinner with their family. We know that one of the pillars of lifestyle medicine, according to Dr. Beth Frades, and not just her, but what social connectivity is a big one, particularly with something that we've experienced this past year, right? If that's your only time that you're with your whole family and having dinner and you're really connecting with something, like now you're going to give that out because you're fasting. Actually, Peter Attia has talked about this time and time again, that he, I think maybe not for fasting, maybe with keto, he stopped doing keto because he was tired of explaining to his children and not being able to share the appropriate meals with them and like that.
Yeah.
So something important to understand. But ultimately, one thing that I've learned from all these folks is really cool is that we really do have to appreciate what our circadian rhythms are and try to optimize and use all these tools, exercise, light, and food as ways that we can modulate those. Dr. Huberman talks about this over and over again. And Dr. Matthew Walker even has a new podcast about sleep. And the last couple of series is talking about people's chronotypes, which essentially is like, whether you're a night owl or a morning lark and how different people have different chronotypes. And he gives us some strategies, I think, in the most recent one of how you can potentially shift your evening bedtime, maybe a little bit further and stuff like that. There's no ideal way to do it. I think most of the literature will support most of the evidence that we have to this day showing that night shift workers and being up late into the evening is going to be detrimental to your health, which is why the World Health Organization has determined night shift work as a potential carcinogen or a risk for cancer. That's a better way to say it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, chronotypes are big, right? And I mean, there's not a lot of us that are night owls, but there are genetically some of us who are. And we're all kind of stuck by whatever our employers tell us to, right? If we're not entrepreneurs and we don't work for our own, then you're stuck in that 9 to 5. And it kind of works to a lot of people's advantage if you choose to, but then it also doesn't. So yeah, it's a good point. His book was great, talking about that as well. Yeah. What else here? I don't know.
No, I think No, at this point, we're probably going to be redundant because if people do listen to it, that these folks, these guests who are so incredibly knowledgeable and so incredibly awesome to just come and educate us and just offer some value to you guys as well. Go check those episodes out and please follow these guys on Instagram, on social media, on their podcast, when they do have one, because there is a lot of value to gain. And, we're all kind of working together in this community to optimize. And it's funny, you talk about how Dr. Shah, with her background of being a South Asian and Southeast Asian, and then, kind of neglecting that, but coming in and now incorporating that in conventional medicine, it's just like, it's literally exactly what you and I are doing.
Dude, 100%, man. And I'm so glad I kind of asked her about like future health professionals. Like, what is your advice, right? Because to be honest, we're one of the few that are trying to, think about lifestyle and like what actually works and not necessarily just being quote unquote brainwashed by the medical education system, but also trying to be open and what's out there, right? And her advice was, listen, if you have a passion, you have something that you really want to see, go for it. Like, don't necessarily just be stifled because your mentor or your attending will tell you, hey, that doesn't work or you can't do that. Go out, look at the data, see for yourself, keep tracking, keep reading. There's so much out there that we're starting to learn that we once thought was wrong. So it's just, I think, luckily lifestyle medicine and wellness is more and more on the come up. So that's always good to see, but this is exactly why we're doing it. Right. And it was funny. My wife told me, well, future wife, kind of wife, I guess, instead of wedding coming up, told me like, she's like, you guys are medicine redefined, but it's not necessarily just redefining health, right? You guys are redefining the approach to health, right? With collaboration. She's like, never was there ever a time where doctors have the opportunity now, or healthcare practitioners have the time to collaborate. Right. And she's like, you guys are redefining that off this platform. And I was like, you know what? Like, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is why we do it. It's so that we can get different perspectives and go in with 3-headed monster or 4-headed monster and approach these issues and kind of give it out there to the other healthcare professionals or the patients.
That's what we need, man. I was telling my attending today that, currently in the United States, I mean, we have 43% obesity rate and it's only climbing. It's just not getting better. And so it's going to require every single one of us across different disciplines to kind of get together and to combat chronic disease and obesity and all the things that are burdening the healthcare system today. It's just not sustainable the way it is right now. So we're all doing it, and hopefully you guys are doing it with us. And, if you guys are doing cool things, which I'm sure you are, then, more power to you. And if you are able to share this episode with somebody who you think will benefit from it, then that would be something that I think would be, we can ask that you're doing your part. We really appreciate that. And then, of course, as always, welcome any feedback, any recommendations that you guys have. We're always ears. You can email us at medredefined@gmail.com. And that's all I got, man.
Yeah. And I'll add, Spotify has this cool new feature where we can ask questions, I think, and take polls. So I'll try to test out some of those things, maybe ask some questions for the listeners. Yeah, it was on Anchor. So we'll test those out. I think we can do like question and we can give some answers based off whatever questions like viewers might have or something. So we might be able to incorporate that in some of these lessons learned. So we'll see. All right. Until next time then, man. All right.
See you.
I just want to reiterate that Altamash and I are super, super grateful for all the listeners out there that show up every single week and learn from us, but also help us grow. From you guys subscribing to rating, reviewing, and sharing these episodes, it's the reason why we do what we do. And like I said at the end of the episode, I mean, we really are trying to redefine medicine. So we really do appreciate that. If you have found this to be helpful, please go ahead, subscribe, share. And again, time for that quick disclaimer. Everything in this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of medicine, and we are not providing medical advice. No physician-patient relationship is formed, and anything discussed in this podcast does not represent the views of our employers. We recommend that you seek the guidance of your personal physician regarding any specific health-related issues. And until next time, let us know if you have any questions. You can email us at medredefined@gmail.com or find both of us on Instagram. Stay blessed.